So joining me on the call today, I have two very, very valuable resources and friends that I've known for a while, Steve Foura and Brett Hansen. Welcome to the call, guys.
Thanks, David.
Our topic today is a good one. We're talking about constant optimization, the new way of doing business. And I suppose just to sort of give a bit of a brief, we've watched the economy change dramatically over the past 4 or 5 years. And what we've noticed mostly is the accelerated change. Like things are moving more quickly. And I think when we look at businesses, how the hell does a business manage to track with all of these changes and still manage to stay profitable? So we're talking about constant optimization today. And really, both of you guys are working at sort of two ends of the business, Steve being in the digital marketing end, which is the front end, and Brett being in the financial services or accounting end, which is the, show me the money end. And I want to talk a bit about constant optimization and how you see that relating to your areas of expertise. So maybe, Steve, start with you.
Yeah, constant optimization is pretty much the major philosophy in our business, to be honest. Without constant optimization, you're not continuing to drive up your return on investment. And one of the cornerstone strategies of constant optimization in digital marketing is testing. So we're continually testing. Yep. Whether it be ad copy, headlines, descriptions, different images on Facebook ads, but also headlines on landing pages. So a key part of our optimization constantly happening is testing variants of landing pages. So I think constant optimization is a real key philosophy in digital marketing to ensure that you get that return on investment.
For sure. And I think, one of the best things that's happened since the internet was everything's measurable. Because in the old days, we used to ask questions like, how did you hear about us? Or people would walk past and we'd try and measure conversion rate from people walking past a store to walking in a store. And it was all done by counters and so forth. But now really all the digital marketing allows us to have metrics that are real time. And so it means that we can make those sorts of decisions. Brett, at the tail end, where do you see constant optimization in terms of business, and what are the strategies that people should be applying now?
Well, I think, David, constant optimization is hard to say. It's all about not looking at the past anymore. From a financial point of view, you've got to look into the future and looking into where your business is going and planning for that, planning for what's happening in a current and a future sense, rather than just sitting back and saying, oh, this is what I did last year or the year before, and utilising technology, utilising best outcomes to be able to identify trends as they happen now. Like financial markets are moving so much quicker than what they used to. Business trends are so different and moving so quickly than what they used to. So using that information to upscale your own business and your own knowledge of your own business.
So I want to drill into this topic a bit, because for me, constant optimization is the way we've seen it implemented is people used to write business plans when they started a business, and they used to keep it on the shelf, and they'd refer to it every year and say, how are we tracking? And what we soon realized is that one business plan doesn't last a year anymore, right? And so we used to do quarterly planning days, and now we've moved to 8-week cycles. And one of the reasons we had to do it is most people found that by the end of a quarter, whatever they planned was either redundant or done. And so we increased the cycle of planning within a business. And I think it's super important these days, because there's, when we talk about implementation and adaptation, ChatGPT has shown record numbers of members or users adapting to a service over a really short period of time. And I don't ever think that's going to stop. I think that's going to get faster. So let's take a deep dive. So Steve, you talked about how you guys are constantly optimizing, but let's talk about the business owner and what you think they should be doing in a sales and marketing space to be in a situation where they are constantly optimizing. What should they be doing?
That's a good question. I think the key for us as a digital marketing agency is developing awareness of the different strategies and channels that are available to business owners.
Yeah.
We often get somebody come to us and say, hey, I've been doing SEO for a couple of years. Can you do some search engine optimization for me? I've fallen out of love with my current agency. But the reality is, when we when we go through the business needs workshop and really deep dive into what are the calls to actions, what are the offers, what are the points of difference of that particular business, what's the level of competition out there, what are the competitors doing, SEO actually might not be the best strategy. We might say pay-per-click, Facebook ads, Google ads, LinkedIn ads, YouTube ads, whatever it might be. and can also combine with conversion rate optimization could be the better strategy. So I think the biggest challenge for us is making business owners aware of the multiple channels that are available and trying to convince them to have a crack at virtually all of them. Because sometimes, like we had a client who was desperate to try YouTube ads a couple of months ago. They just didn't work for his business.
Yeah.
But it was worthwhile testing, but it was pretty quick. As you mentioned before, digital marketing is easy to measure performance. So we were able to, within a few weeks, say, hey, this isn't going to work. And we've gone back to sort of putting most of our eggs into the Facebook ads basket and testing Google ads now. But the measurement you mentioned before, David, I think is crucial. So with our landing page optimization that we do, we might have, say, 2 or 3 variants running, and we might split 33%, 50% traffic, whatever it might be, according to the number of variants.
Yeah.
And the data that we can get, we can say, here's the conversion rates on each of them.
Yeah.
But the software these days, the technology is so fantastic. It takes our decision-making away. It actually comes back and says, here's our confidence level, percentage-wise, that we believe you should switch to this variant as the champion variant. So once we hit that 95% level of confidence, we say, here's the champion, and we create 2 other variants. So measuring is really crucial. And I guess from a business owner's point of view, testing different channels, but also honouring the data. Sometimes it's nice, clients like to be ranked high for certain keywords, but if that data shows that it's not really generating any traffic or leads for your business, is it really worthwhile? So I guess, constantly looking at the data is crucial.
Well, here's my take on this, because what you've touched on is super important, and it comes down to how much money should I spend on marketing, and where should I spend my marketing dollars, and how do I know it's working? And when I look at a business, my primary measurement for success of marketing is how much does it cost to buy a client?
Yep.
Right? Not a lead, not a sales call, not a proposal, but an actual paying client. And the connection between a lead and the money coming in the door from a client can be quite a time gap. And with the data that you've talked about, if we extend that into the CRM and make sure that the sales reps are doing what they're supposed to be doing, we can use this constant optimization as part of how do we improve our sales process? How do we change our sales message? How do we optimize our conversion so that we're actually getting paying clients? And this really closes the loop, right? Because once people know what their acquisition cost is per channel, they can then assess where they should be spending more money and less money. So, Brett, let's hear from you. When we talk about constant optimization, you mentioned something, which is we shouldn't be looking at financials anymore, which is a big statement for an accountant. So you've got me curious.
Well, it's not that we don't look at financials, but it's more that we're looking in the future and planning for that. So, Steve talked about digitalization and using the power we use the power of forecasting and also predicting certain things around data that's coming now from AI, you can always look into the past, but the past is gone. So it's looking into the future and looking at whether it's cash flow, profitability, looking into where your balance sheet is, where can you invest, investing in that marketing. And you talk about that, the cost of marketing or the cost of picking up a client or investing in a new client is really budgeting for what you want to spend, but B, then monitoring that monthly, quarterly, as you talked about, David, every 8 weeks type of scenario, because you need to be in this current environment, you need to be able to react quickly to changing times and changing measures, and it's things like interest rates rises and things like that, how quickly they've moved over the last 12 months. Is that if all you're doing now is sitting back going, okay, we're at the end of another financial year, let's now get my financials done and get my tax return done, and then my accountant can tell me, hey, this is what you did this time 12 months ago. It's not good enough anymore. It really hasn't been good enough for a while, but what we've seen over the change over the last 5 years with COVID and with lockdowns and with businesses really suffering from that, it's so important now to understand where you're going and where you're going to be if certain things happen, and then putting things in place for those outcomes. Putting in that, we always talk about side accounts and things like that, and for cash flow and keeping things up to date, and that might be out of the trading entity. So it's planning for those things that come into play.
Yeah, you mentioned a really important point here too, and you talked about this predicting the future. And if I was trying to summarize leadership in business to one word, I would say prediction.
Mm.
Right? And a lot of people in business, they're too busy to predict the future. They're too busy chasing their tail, and they're not doing leadership properly. Because in my mind, leadership is about reading the play and predicting what's going to happen. Now, we never know, right? All we can do is say, I think this is going to happen, and then we can test the results and move quickly.
Yeah.
So when we talk about constant optimization, there's an old philosophy around, a rocket that gets launched and goes to the moon has a guidance system in it. Did you know that the rocket is only ever on track 2% of the time? Which means 98% of the time the corrections are being sort of implemented through the guidance system. And I think for people in business, they should be making those corrections real time. And so when we talk about real-time reporting on the front end with sales and marketing, then we talk about real-time prediction. So looking at the stats live, making decisions live, making sure that we're budgeting for a profit. You talked about all of those sorts of things. And I just feel people are too drowned in the operations of their business to be thinking strategically. So here's what happens when people are down in the engine room putting coal into the fire. They're not at the helm directing the ship, and that didn't end well for the Titanic.
Well, it's that whole concept, David, of work on, not in, and it's been around for years, and it's so pertinent now is that you've got to be working on your business so that you're again reacting, whether it's daily, weekly. You've got to be on it.
Yeah, and having the stats, like you say, with the financials, I can tell financials tell me what's happened, right? Mm-hmm. And so they give me a rearview mirror sort of view of what occurred in the last month. But then if we look one step further, we can start predicting the future based on those figures. And this is what you touched on. And I feel most people aren't good at budgeting. They use traditional budgeting methods, which is take last year's figures and add 10%. Or they go, look at the last 3 years and look at the trend. But the problem is when we've got a business world that is evolving so quickly, the trends don't really tell the full story anymore.
Well, I get a lot of clients that say to me, "Oh, I can't do a budget because how can you budget in my industry or my business? And I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. It just happens, and it's all up here." And well, what is it? You fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah, and so it's super interesting. So let's summarize this conversation because we're talking about constant optimization as the new way of doing business. If you had to pick 2 or 3 key tips for a business owner in terms of how do I make sure that I'm approaching or leading into this new way of doing business, what would they be? Steve?
Definitely continually testing. So you've got multiple variants. It could be headlines, could be copy, could be images, like I said earlier, but constantly testing and measuring that performance. And that's the key to constant optimization, measuring the performance of what you're testing.
So really what you're saying is you should never have one strategy. You should always have 2. Because you've got no comparator, right? So those people have got one marketing strategy, you've got no comparator. When you've got 2, you can say which one's going better, and you can change.
Absolutely. Even within one strategy, so Google Ads, for example, we would still be testing different campaigns, and within that we test different ad groups, and within that we test different ads and different keywords. So the testing is the real theme to really get on top of that constant optimization. And in our industry, it's always getting the cost per lead down. Mm-hmm. Of course, we rely on sales to close that loop, like you were saying, David. We can certainly help with marketing automation, but the constant optimization of getting that cost per lead down is the key factor for us. Yeah,
awesome. So, Brett, top 2 tips.
Don't just be the norm. Don't just be doing the normal of saying, okay, well, now I've got the end of financial year done. Now I can work out how I went last year. Really looking towards the future and the succession of your business is what's that next step? Where's that next dollar coming from? And investing in your own financial future, be that from cash in the bank to structure to your succession plan, what's going on from that point of view. You really got to, take the last few years and learn from it and learn that looking in the past doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. And for me, like my simple tip is this, right? You need a growth planning system in your business. So you need to recognize that planning isn't something you do once or you do once a quarter. It's something you should be doing all the time. And part of that is when the dynamics of the market change, as Steve said, you do your testing. You put 2 things out there, the one that's better you go with, and then you put a new test out to see if you can beat it. And you're constantly trying to improve on what's currently working. So I believe with planning as well is you might know how much you want to make in business, but there's going to be many, many variations on the road. Right. So coming back to, planning on a regular basis, whether it's every 2 months the way we do it, or whether it's weekly or whether it's monthly. I think people need to be doing the planning, as you said, Brett, and not just have a plan.
Yeah.
Awesome. Guys, it's a very important topic right now. And I think for a lot of people, they're struggling with overwhelm. And I think they do really need to realize that being in business is, and sometimes I have to simplify it to people and say, being in business is finding where there's a gap in the market and filling the gap. And that's when you make profit. And if everyone starts copying you, which they inevitably do in a market, you're going to get into a commoditized product and you need to differentiate again. So this optimization means just keeping ahead of the curve all the time and making sure that you've got a value add that is distinctly different to everyone else's, and so that you can maintain and preserve margins as well. Any leaving comments before we wrap this one up? If you're going to summarize today's conversation in one word, what would it be?
Testing equals optimization.
Testing equals optimization. Well, that's a few words, but it's close. One sentence. Brett.
I'll go for a sentence: future, not past.
Future, not past. So thinking about how we're going to move forward. Guys, thanks again for today. We want to keep it short and sharp so everyone can get some great value, and appreciate your time.
Thanks,
Thanks for
David.
having me, David.